Why do we race? Did you ever really think about that? I'm not just talking about pinning a bib on and stepping up to the starting line. I want to talk about everything that goes along with that. There's plenty of good reasons to pin a bib on, plenty of positive aspects that it can bring to both your running and your life in general. There are also negative aspects as well. The good things can also lead to the bad things. The positive can also lead you down a road towards the negatives. That is something that's kind of been on my mind recently, and I'll talk about why in a moment. But before we get to that, I want to outline some of the good and bad aspects to racing that just came to me as I was thinking this through. Maybe I'll give you actually a moment here. How about that? Maybe just watch along, grab a post-it note, index card, scrap of paper, whatever you got. Think about your own pros and cons as far as racing in general, and maybe how that applies to you personally before I go through my list, so we can cross-reference each other. So a little bit of scenery here. I'll put a chapter if you want to skip this part. Okay, I hope you came up with some good ones there. Let's see if they match up. I've got my idiot sheet here since I am out on a hike today. Not a run, get to that again, but have some time to kind of look at some notes as I go along. Let's start with the positive aspects here. And I don't know, these are in no particular order, just what kind of came to me. So maybe there is some kind of subconscious ordering to them. Goal setting, how about that? Setting big goals for yourself. That's an aspect that really works for me because I find that if I don't have a race on the calendar or don't have something on the horizon, whether it's a kind of adventure or exploration, maybe a traditional race, maybe a race in a different kind of format, that kind of helps me to orient my life, orient my training, sets up some type of structure for me to like guide what I'm doing, not just going out there aimlessly. Second point I actually wrote down here is structure, and I put in parentheses training and life. I find that is a positive for me in terms of my running, the racing aspect of it. I just feel maybe, I don't know how to say it, maybe unmoored. If there's not a race on the calendar, you can kind of fall into habits of maybe not running as much, maybe not getting out into as varied terrain as you would need to for different types of races, different distances, durations, running faster, running slower, building up more endurance, that kind of thing. I find that having that within my quote-unquote running life also makes me happier, makes me feel better in my general life as well. So there's certainly an aspect of taking that structure as far as structuring your life, structuring your training, your weeks, your calendars with a target or event in mind, a race. That kind of, it feels better in my day-to-day life. Next one I have here is accountability. I am reading these one by one, so it must be a train of thought kind of thing. Yeah, that accountability aspect, whether that means waking up early, setting up your schedule, planning your routine so that you can do what you think you need to do for a race or that upcoming goal, whatever it is. I find that can be a positive aspect. Of course, everybody's, I think, works better on a schedule. At least maybe certain types of personalities work better without having a schedule, but for me, and I think a lot of runners, certainly if you're keyed into your training, keyed into what you're doing as far as progression towards improvement, having a schedule like that, and again, the race integrates with your schedule in terms of accountability. You want to make sure you're sticking to that schedule to meet the goal race that you're training for or looking forward to experiencing. Next on my list here is challenge. Yeah, this is, we're gonna come back to why or why not. It has to be a specific organized race. Could it be a challenge? Do you need a challenge? Are certain types of people more oriented towards needing that challenge, whether it be a race or something personal even, versus just being out there running for fun? Got two more on my non-exhaustive list here. This one definitely applies to me, and I'm sure some of you out there. Competitiveness, and I also put competitive outlet here. Okay, I consider myself competitive against myself, but also competitive against other runners. A race is obviously a test to see who can get to the finish line first. Also, you can look at it as a way, if you're not thinking of it in those purely competitive aspects versus being against other runners, you're competing against yourself, or you can be competing against yourself or the terrain, a course, in a sense. In my particular case, whatever I was doing growing up, different sports, played a lot of team sports, used to race on inline skates for one thing, played a lot of roller hockey, all the other typical sports, basketball, all that stuff. I was always competitive. I always felt like I enjoyed that, going up against an opponent, something like that. Running is a little bit different. I find that especially as I'm focusing on ultra distance, longer distance stuff, you're never really focusing on an actual opponent in the human sense. You're more or less focusing on yourself, or I find that's the best case scenario. That's different, of course, for highly competitive top end athletes, pro runners. That's a different scenario. Did put a couple bullet points as far as that, but that's not applicable to me. But in the sense of local races or kind of smaller regional races, races where I can find myself being competitive, there is an aspect of it that does come into play. Sometimes I want to win, sometimes I want to be up there on the podium, top 10, whatever the relative space competitively that I'm in. That can be the challenge for me. And last on my list here, I don't know why I put this last, but I put fitness. That's perhaps the most obvious, but perhaps not the most obvious if you're specifically thinking about racing. If you're thinking about running or starting up any type of training, it doesn't have to be running. Maybe the race is an aspect to the fitness. Again, coming back to goal setting, challenging yourself, pushing yourself to go further. The race can be an aspect of that that really pushes you, or it could be that little extra that you need, that nugget, that carrot, you know, as far as pure fitness gains. But I think I was mainly thinking about the pure racing aspects. Fitness probably falls more into the category of why are you running in general, or whatever activity you are doing in general. Well, let's move on to the other side of the ledger here, the cons section or the negative section. This is what I've got. By the way, did you go back and check your list? Did some of your list items as far as positives match up with some of mine? Do you have other ones that you had that I maybe didn't think of, or perhaps maybe I feel don't apply to me? Who knows? Let me know down in the comments. Okay, negative, and maybe this is saying something that I put it first. Ego. Man, ego just be the downfall of many things, downfall of many people, many athletes. Is your ego holding you back? Is your ego pushing you to do things that you don't need to do or don't have a good reason to do. Next one, external validation. I think we live in a world very oriented towards that type of aspect. Media, social media, general media, the way that everything is out there. My next bullet point is actually quote unquote pros: money, fame, making a living. I'm not going to speak to that too much because of course I'm not a pro runner, and I assume a lot of you, or probably the majority of you watching, are not pro runners either. So those types of aspects of making a living, having to earn money, in fact, and fame in the sense of, you know, earning a living in a certain sense. Those are aspects for the professional field that most of us shouldn't be thinking about, right? We shouldn't be thinking about getting famous. And there is that aspect of external validation, and I think that is not just a pro thing. That's probably maybe more applicable to general runner out there, general athlete out there, such as you and me. Do people look at you in your life as the athlete, the runner, the guy or gal that does these crazy things, pushes themselves to the limit all the time? Is that something? I have this in the con column. Pushing yourself, kind of seeing where your limits are, certainly can be positive, but in terms of external validation, the question is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you're trying to keep up that feeling, that not necessarily facade, but that aspect that you do enjoy, of course, ego coming into it again here. You maybe enjoy people seeing you that way, thinking of you that way, and maybe feeling that way about yourself. Maybe there's nothing wrong with that to a certain degree. A couple more items on my list here. These are not, I would say, first level negatives. These are probably more derivative. I wrote down here, keeping the ball rolling. These positive and negative aspects, whether they be positive, whether they be negative, they could all kind of work together in your running life, so to speak, and it just becomes this machine like anything else. I'm talking about running here, but this can be applicable to anything in life. Once you get in a kind of certain rhythm, certain mechanisms are in place, certain things become of value to you, whether that's for reasons that are in the pro column or the con column. They can lead you, in a sense, to having this machine and having this be a thing. Keeping the ball rolling, keeping that momentum going becomes a thing in and of itself. The training, the racing, the next block, the next race. After a while, you're just keeping that ball rolling continuously. And again, that's, I think, something that's an aspect that is derivative from the pros and cons. So sometimes we don't look back and think of those, say, first order positives, those first order negatives. We just are keeping the ball rolling, keeping that machine going. So we've got positives, we've got negatives. Maybe they're in the wrong column. Maybe the column that I have them in, good or bad, is different than the column that you have some of those items in. Who's to say who's right or wrong? There is no right and wrong. So we've got positives, we've got negatives, pros, cons. We've got this machine, this ball that we have to keep rolling, which is our running life as a whole. But is that machine, is that ball that we keep on rolling, is that a disconnect from those reasons why we started running in the first place? I remember in a very fond sense my first trail race. I talked about that, I think, in my TT video. Check that one out. Just getting all mucked up, flying down the trails, through the woods, just feeling of just, I don't know, happiness, fun, enjoy. Like, I wasn't thinking about anything. I didn't think about training. I didn't think about the next race. I didn't talk to anybody out there about what's your next race, what do you have on the schedule. I was just running and just pure love of it. I mean, I remember that very specifically. So that begs the question, is that pushing of the ball forward, is that turning of the hamster wheel, so to speak, is that kind of clouding you or disguising those original pros and cons that you had, those original feelings that you had when you perhaps did your first trail race, when you started running, in fact? Are those pros that we listed, let's talk about the pros only here. Obviously, we don't want to think about the negatives in that regard. Are the pros that you get from trail racing, the ones that we talked about today, are those in alignment with some of the feelings that you had in your first trail race? Do you even think about some of those aspects? Or is it just, no, I just do what I have to do to get to the next race, and then do what I have to do to get to the next race after that? I'm not saying that's exactly what you're thinking, but a lot of things can get lost as you start going through that cycle over and over the seasons and over the years. All right, so this is a shoe and gear review channel primarily. I try to do some other things from time to time. This is one of them. Why am I talking about this kind of stuff? I did have a race on the calendar, very important one to me, Banana Slug Backyard Ultra, later on this week. Actually, a few days from now, but you will not find me on the starting line. Talked about this just a touch. Talked about the race a lot over the course of my reviews as I've kind of oriented some of my content, stuff that I've been running in, testing out around the Backyard Ultra. But no, I will not actually be out there on the line this week, unfortunately. Talked about some issues that I've been having with my hip from time to time. It's kind of been going on. It was definitely worse around, I don't know where the genesis was. I believe I really strained my hip flexors pretty badly. One day I went Nordic skiing out of the blue, which I hadn't done in years. Not a great idea, don't recommend it. Not the Nordic skiing aspect. Going full bore into an activity that you have not done in years. But I really strained my left hip flexor that day, and from then on I was kind of having issues with it. I just finally went after months and months. It has been progressing, improving. I feel actually a few days off of running now better than ever. Even when I went for the appointment last week, I was feeling probably the best I had in about, say, 3 months, but it just wasn't fully gone. Like, it was just lingering there, and I wanted to get it checked out. I thought maybe I have a tear or something that I could get some advice on how to like work through, or how to work on some stretches or mobility or activations or something that could make it go away once and for all. But as it turns out, I do have a stress reaction in my left femur, which is a low grade, I would say, injury, but I guess serious enough where you want to stop the progression. You don't want it to get to, say, a stress fracture. That being said, hiking along here, I've been running 90-mile weeks with this. It has been, like I said, getting better. I don't feel it at all right now. Even when I was training, stacking like 90-mile weeks in anticipation of the Backyard Ultra, it was just, I would feel it on downhill sometimes, but more or less could run through it. I ran a 6-hour race, like full bore. I forgot 7-something pace for like 6 hours nonstop. Came out of that like sort of like any other race, but nothing in particular debilitating in that area. I did go for an MRI scan as part of this kind of evaluation. First MRI that I've ever gotten in my life. I guess you can see the inflammation in there, but no actual fracture or anything like that. So the prognosis is, 1 month, no running. All right, here comes the venting part. I, of course, as any runner would do, and I'm sure you can relate to struggled with whether or not I should follow the doctor's advice. Do I run the race anyway? Do I just ignore this? I'm fine. I feel like I'm fine. I could do it. This doesn't matter. It's not going to hold me back. I believe that is called the denial stage. I'm past that right now. I mean, cooler heads have prevailed, namely my wife kind of telling me that this is serious and, you know, putting the long game, the big picture more at the forefront of my mind versus perhaps some of those what I think are positive aspects. I'm going to circle back to that after my little vent session here. Competitiveness, proving something, keeping that ball rolling. Ego, in fact, talked about running this race. Really trained hard. Honestly, I put a lot of effort into this event, feeling probably as fit as ever, aside from that injury aspect, unfortunately. But yeah, certain aspects of ego definitely come into play in that regard. Certainly, of course, a contributing factor. I'm talking about it here on this channel, semi-public here. There's people out in the world that watch this. That's another aspect. Can't be denied. But yeah, I've made what is, I consider now, and am at peace with now, to be the smart and rational decision. Number one, I'm not gonna race. Number two, perhaps even more important, I'm gonna follow doctor's orders, which is not, my first instinct, okay? I have to be honest with you. I was like, I could do this. They don't understand. I'm different. I could handle this. I know my body. Yada, yada, yada. So forget all that. I'm going to listen to the doctor. I don't think a month off will be too bad. Again, I'm coming to grips with it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute here, but no, I will not be racing this coming week. I'm 1 week in to no running. Luckily, I do have the green light to stay active as long as it is not producing impact on my leg and as long as I don't get any hint of any feeling of discomfort in my leg. And I've been cycling indoors. We have Peloton at the house. I went skating one day, longer walks with the dog. Of course, I'm coaching elementary track. The season is winding down. Typically, I'd be running all over the place with them. I like to have fun with that, but more or less standing there with a whistle these days. And probably do some more relaxing hikes as I am today. So circling back here to that aspect of keeping the ball rolling, quote unquote, that was my first instinct, and not in the positive aspect of it. Let me tell you, everything I was just talking about, keeping the ball rolling. I train for this race. I run every single day. I put the time in. This is the next thing on the calendar. After this, there's something else. How can I have a disruption in my training? Am I not going to be able to race as hard as I want after this race? Again, always thinking about the next and the next and the next. The moment is telling me I need to slow down. I need to take this thing seriously. Something is trying to tell me that this is the right course of action, and I have to be receiving of that, have to be ready to accept that and move forward. Find the best way moving forward, not just fall back on those kind of old senses of keeping that ball rolling forward in the way that it always has. What would that entail? Keeping the ball rolling forward in this sense. Am I thinking about just myself? Am I being selfish here? Of course I am. I'm thinking about my training, my racing, my season. Am I thinking about other priorities? Am I thinking about my family? Other things going on in my life outside of running? Am I thinking about all of those aspects when I'm coming to this decision? Am I taking those into account? I should be. So let's bring it back to the racing aspect here. Talk a lot about that ball rolling forward, that hamster wheel situation. A lot of times in racing, you could also, another metaphor, thinking about it as this ladder that you're climbing. A lot of the races you're talking about having points, having qualifiers, having stones to get to that next level, to get to that next tier. You're running races for what reason? For the sake of running more races? You're constantly climbing up this ladder, and there's always another rung on top of that ladder. When you get to the top of that ladder, maybe the next season starts again, or the next goal, and then, oh boy, you don't want to lose this guy. There's always this point where somehow or another, you can never quite figure it out, you find yourself back at the bottom of the ladder. Whether that's intentional or not, the way these races are set up, or the way your running is set up, you're just back at the bottom of the ladder, and then you're just climbing up and up and up again. So these are just things coming to my mind as I'm grappling with this, so to speak. I talk about this in such serious tones, but it's really not. Having to take a month off of running, probably a privilege in a sense. I know there's many injuries, many runners out there that have to deal with a lot worse than this. So I find myself and acknowledge that I'm definitely privileged that I can be in a scenario where I'm complaining about having to be off of running for just 4 small weeks. So I'm trying to find some kind of direction in that. Not going to this race, that got me thinking about some of these positive aspects. What was my mindset going into this race? What is my mindset going into all these races? Are the things that I'm doing, are the things that I do throughout the course, things that I've done throughout the course of this training block, which I thought was quite serious, these same things that I do or have done in previous training blocks and previous seasons and repeated this pattern over and over. What are the good things? What is that bringing to me? Are there net positives to that? Yes, I believe there are. Okay, I'm not trying to, this is not a retirement video by any means. I'm not going to stop running and racing. That's not what I'm trying to get to, but maybe just thinking about things in a different way, that kind of go, go, go mentality. I think it is getting probably worse and worse. I find myself kind of falling into that trap, seeing what others are doing. There's so many pro athletes, obviously on a level 10 times above my head, 10 times above many of your heads, but we think we should follow what they do. Many of us do that. I do myself. I think I should do what they're doing, knowing full well that I'm not going to get to the point where they're at. That's not feasible, but for some reason I should still do that. And they're kind of training and racing and their cycle of their running careers. That doesn't necessarily have to be a model for all runners out there, for everybody out there. That doesn't have to be a model for your running life. All the positive aspects we've been talking about, if you're not careful, they can lead you down a path towards those negative aspects or transforming to those negative aspects. There's always a push and pull, give and take, goal setting in a positive sense we talked about. And I've just talked about that ladder. There's always that bigger goal. There's always that next rung. If you're not careful, what you thought was a positive, setting those goals, pushing yourself, can put you on a path towards just looking and searching for that next goal, that bigger goal, for which there'll never be an end. Also, another positive aspect, the structure. We all know how training can take over your life, your weekends, your vacations, your family life. Applicable to me, guilty as charged, of course. Structure, you feel like that's a positive in certain regards, but that structure, when you impose it on other aspects of your life, it can lead you down a path where it kind of takes over your life in a negative way. Accountability, yeah, you want to wake up in the morning, be on time, you want to stick to the plan, hit your goals, but also accountability can also be in opposition to, or the opposite of, flexibility, freedom. Do you always have to get up every single day, even if you're perhaps injured? You said you were going to do this race. I said I was going to do this backyard ultra. I want to be accountable. I'm just going to do it no matter what, even though it could be detrimental to my health, to my body, to my family, to many other things. The flexibility to choose the correct decision, that can be held hostage by accountability. Challenges, again, they don't ever get smaller, do they? They tend to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you're not careful, the challenges can just grow to a point where they're just outsized in relation to what you can handle in your life. Competitiveness. All right, we all know where this can lead. Looking at other runners as far as being adversaries, or not just other runners, yourself. Comparing yourself to maybe your previous self, what you did last year, what you did in prior years, what you think, what you feel, which may or may not be accurate, you're capable of. That competitiveness can drive you, can push you in negative ways too. Fitness, again, last on my positive list, maybe higher up for some of you out there, but in terms of racing, that's where I had it. Obviously, I'm dealing with this now. Health, injury, overtraining. I can't say what did this to me. Was it overtraining? It could be. Was it stubbornness in not letting that initial kind of tweak, that initial maybe slight injury grow into something bigger? I don't know for sure, but I certainly was not thinking about this in the sense of being flexible and being free to take a step back in order to move forward in the future. So that's where I'm at right now. No race for me this week. My next event on the calendar is Broken Arrow. Signed up for the triple, but given this interruption here, I'm gonna have to think through what I'm gonna do at that event. If I'm gonna do all three, pretty steep over there too, so I'm not sure if doing that would be the best option. I think, or I would like to think, that in going through this process, it's only been a week so far, okay? But a week is a week. It took me a full week to come to grips with this, come to the point where I'm thinking more openly about this now and really perhaps looking forward to and enjoying having a break from running, thinking about what I'm gonna do to keep myself busy, both activity-wise and also on the channel here on Humble Running. I do have a backup of ideas. I just have these lists all over the place, and trust me, plenty of ideas, and that is another positive aspect perhaps. Sometimes I get in this motion of the shoe reviews, the comparisons, this and that, and just one after the other, and I kind of put some other ideas I have to the side. Same way with running, training, and racing. That kind of thing applies to Humble Running content as well. That being said, I have a lot of good ideas, so you may see some new and different ideas in the coming 3 weeks, and also maybe some fun stuff as I hopefully and will become injury-free and get back into it. Maybe I'll come up with some new thoughts and ideas, and I'm sure I will learn a lot, because I have never, since I've been running, taken a full 4 weeks off with I have never taken a full week, so this is, even at this point, unprecedented. So surely I will learn a lot throughout this process, which hopefully it'll be interesting and shareable with you. I hope this one was a start as well, just something to think about. No problems if you are enjoying your training and racing. Obviously, you've got races on the calendar. Good luck to you. I wish I could be out there racing. Don't get that twisted. I want to be out there racing. I do enjoy the positive aspects, but it is good to kind of think about everything as a whole take a step back at times. So I would invite you to think about those things that kind of floated into my mind throughout the course of this video, throughout the course of this week for me. I did a week's worth of thinking so that I could share it with you. So hopefully that will give you a head start. If you got any other ideas for humble running content, pine cones. Now would be probably the best time, as I have probably a little bit more bandwidth to do some explorations. So if you got something in mind, let me know down in the comments. If something in this video jogged some thoughts in your brain about running and racing and anything, in fact, love to hear that also down below in the comments. Thank you for tuning in once again. One down, 3 weeks to go for me as far as getting out there running. I have a couple of cool shoes in for test, more than a couple in fact. I might do some quick looks because a few of them are quite interesting. So you might see some early impression videos minus the running aspect. Hopefully they won't be too boring compared to what you're used to seeing on the channel. But again, thank you for watching. I'll see you out on the trails next time, hopefully.